Hello everyone, and welcome back to Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat. We have a very special episode for you today. We're going to be looking at a beautiful collection of very significant airplanes from Douglas Aircraft Company and the MacDonald Aircraft Corporation. These models are a combination of Allen, topping, and factory model shop conversions into the beautiful display models that you see here. And we're going to talk about these airplanes individually and why they were significant in aviation history. The first model we're going to look at today is the Douglas Skyraider. It was called the AD, stood for Attack Douglas in the original designation. In the war in Southeast Asia, it was then redesignated the A1. So here we've got the single seat model. This was the AD6 or the A1H. And a very significant airplane in that it was developed too late to see action in World War II, but it was a pivotal airplane in the Korean War and in Southeast Asia as well. The Air Force and Navy used them for attack missions, and they were nicknamed in the Air Force the SPAD as a kind of a left-handed slap at the slow speed. But that speed was a tremendous asset during attack missions for accuracy and for the Sandy missions where the Skyraiders were used to direct air rescue missions to pick up downed pilots in the jungles. It's an interesting airplane, one of the largest radial engine aircraft produced and built by Douglas and El Segundo, and served again from the early 1950s to the late 1960s. Let's talk about the model for a moment. It's interesting because it's molded in dark sea gloss blue, and the propeller is painted black with yellow tips, which is an Air Force configuration. When the Navy went to gull gray in the mid-1950s, the prop tips were painted with red and white stripes. This particular model was modified in that it has a solid, clear plexiglass canopy with beautifully detailed canopy frames, as you can see here. And on the bottom of the model, there was a modification to accept a different base than the normal Allen. The decals are quite simple, just the national insignia, no other bureau numbers or Navy as was done in those days. And an elegant model in its simplicity, but again, a beautiful representation of the Douglas AD Sky Raider. Next up is the Douglas Skyshark, a follow-on to the AD Sky Raider. And this was conceived as the successor to that airplane, but there was one unfortunate Achilles heel, and that was the Allison T40 geared turboprop engine with contra-rotating propellers. What's interesting is on the model, the propellers do operate. They're geared so that they rotate as they did on the airplane. It has a clear canopy and a little more detail on the decal sheet. Starting from the nose, it's got the Skyshark logo and, of course, the national insignia. And then it does have Navy and the bureau number with the A3D operational Navy designation. But the problem with this airplane was that although the airframe was advanced, the turboprop contra-rotating engine just led to component failure. Almost every airplane that was fitted with this power plant ultimately was unsuccessful. And so the Skyshark never saw operational use. A number of them were built, and one was lost in an accident. The others have survived in museums. But the model overall is quite stunning. And it's interesting to note that the Navy decal appears only on the underside below the left wing and not above, as would normally be done. So there's a look at the Douglas XA2D-1 Skyshark. The next model is significant in Douglas history and in Navy history because it was Douglas's first Navy jet aircraft, and that's the F4D Sky Knight, spelled with a K for night. And this was a radar interceptor. It's a straight wing airplane, a large airframe because it needed a large airplane with twin engines in those days to carry the radar system and the antenna, which early electronics was quite large and quite heavy. But the F3D distinguished itself in the Korean War. It was the first jet to make a night intercept and the first jet to shoot down another jet aircraft during that time period using radar guidance for the intercept. It was powered by two engines. It did not have ejection seats. The escape system was a chute that came out the bottom of the airplane, and that was tested at El Centro. As long as the airplane was at altitude, that worked quite well. But it was not a fast supersonic shape by any means. It was a subsonic machine, but it was used by the Marines in Vietnam, and it was an interesting airplane. It performed its mission quite well, and again was significant in the fact that it was Douglas's first Navy jet-powered aircraft. Now we're going to look at two different airplanes from a different manufacturer. And this is the MacDonald Company in St. Louis. And these are the two versions of the Banshee, a Korean War era, or I should say post-Korean War era Navy jet. Straight wing, analogous to the Grumman Panther Cougar family. And the Banshee was developed from the MacDonald Phantom 1, which was the first pure jet to operate off an aircraft carrier. But the Banshee that we see here, the first model, is the F2H-1 and would also be the Dash 2 version. It's a straight wing and has tip tanks, a shorter fuselage, and a cruciform tail, as you see there. The second would be the F2H-3. This had uprated engines, different engine exhaust configuration in the trailing edge of the wing, and a horizontal stabilizer that is aft of the vertical fin, as well as an extended fuselage. What's really ironic, and the reason we include the Banshee in this grouping, is that it was the MacDonald Company that merged with Douglas Aircraft in 1967. Going back to the Douglas Aircraft Company, the Navy division in El Segundo, California, we're going to look at the largest, heaviest aircraft to operationally fly from an aircraft carrier, and that is the A3D Sky Warrior. The Navy airplanes were designed by a team led by the great Ed Heinemann, and on this model is a good example of what they call the Heinemann curve, which is the dorsal spine that leads up to the vertical stabilizer. It's a trademark of all the Douglas Navy airplanes. This particular model is done in the mid-50s gull gray with a white underside. It was a strategic attack bomber designed to carry a nuclear weapon to an enemy from an aircraft carrier, first time that was ever done. And I mentioned that it was the largest, heaviest carrier-based airplane, and we'll probably get comments. Yes, I know that a Lockheed C-130 and a U-2 were test flown off carriers. And of course, with all due respect, the Grumman F-14 and the North American A3J Vigilante were quite large airplanes. But when you look at all the specs, it's the A3D that wins the crown of being the largest, and its 75,000-pound takeoff weight, the heaviest airplane ever to operate from a carrier. This is a beautiful model, and it's really a good representation of the machine. And my favorite part of it, the twin tail guns at the base of the tail, tell you that this machine is all business. Perhaps the most well-known, and I would have to say most significant Navy airplane in this collection would be the A4 Skyhawk. It's known as the Scooter, Heinemann's hot rod, a legendary naval airplane used in the Vietnam War. And for many other uses, it's flown by a number of different countries around the world, different air forces, and is still in service to this day. The thing about the A4, at the time it was the longest produced naval aircraft with 2,960 built total in El Segundo and Long Beach. Something to mention is the wingspan of the A4, which was designed for a very specific reason. The wingspan is short. The airplane is built around the wing. And the reason for that dimension was that it was the minimum that two A4s could be towed side by side past each other on the hangar deck of an Essex-class aircraft carrier. And that gave the airplane its look. It was used by the Blue Angels in the 1970s and 1980s. The two-seat versions, the TA-4J, served as the backbone of the Naval Air Training Command for carrier qualifications. It was just a very legendary, very significant airplane. This last A4 Skyhawk model we're going to look at is really bears special mention. It's a very rare, very valuable Douglas factory model shop rendition of the A4 Skyhawk. But what makes this particular model interesting today is that it appears the way it did in the 1950s. It's what we call a survivor. It's got character to it. It's not pristine. It has an identification number on the bottom, which gives it tremendous historical value. But it's missing a landing gear. It's got scuffs and scratches. It's not a prize winner by any means, but it is a rare original example of what a factory model looked like in those days. We had a saying in the collector car industry back in the 80s when that became popular, is that you could make something pretty, you could make it win a show and a trophy, but you can't make it original. It's only original one time. And this model is a perfect example of how that works. It's a beautiful representation of the Douglas A4 Skyhawk from the factory in El Segundo in those days. And it is in raw, as-is condition, which is what we call it, why we call it a survivor. This airplane is the answer to the question, was there ever a supersonic Douglas Navy jet? And the answer is yes. It was the F4D Sky Ray, which achieved supersonic speed in a slight dive. But it was powered by a J57 engine. Really was the first delta wing carrier-based fighter in the Navy inventory. It flew in the mid-1950s, and it was a significant airplane in that it was a very advanced design at its time, and again, a result of the Ed Heinemann design team. The F4D Sky Ray was an aesthetically beautiful airplane. This particular model is an Allen example, and you can tell that by the round base. And what's unusual is it has a metal stand arm. Normally these were clear. It gives a beautiful representation of a beautiful airplane. And the decals, again, very simple, with the gloss sea blue, navy, and the F4D on the vertical tail. My favorite part of this model is the canopy and windshield, which is basically a single piece of clear plastic that is inserted up into the model and then mates with the plastic windshield frame and canopy frame. It's a really elegant touch and a nice departure from the painted canopy and windshield that you'd see on other models. Just for comparison, I'm going to show you a Douglas factory model made out of wood and how that compares to the Allen plastic kit. The Douglas model shop, like many other companies, produce some really beautiful representations of their factory products, and this model certainly is one of them. The final model to look at in this collection is the elegant F5D Sky Lancer. This was developed as a follow-on to the F4D Sky Ray. It had enhanced performance and reached near Mach 2 speeds and was developed to compete with the Vought F8 Crusader and ultimately the MacDonald F4H Phantom. The Phantom wound up with the long-term production contract. Only 4 Sky Lancers were built, but it was the end of an era for the single-seat, single-engine Navy point defense interceptor. However, a number of Sky Lancers were used by NASA, and this was for development of the X-20 Dinosaur and also as a chase plane for the lifting bodies. It's interesting to note that the F-5D was the very last airplane flown by Neil Armstrong before he was selected for NASA astronaut training and ultimately the Apollo space program. Neil developed a very interesting maneuver as a emergency landing profile for the X-20 in that he would do a split S maneuver over the lake bed at Edwards from as low as 2,500 feet to get the airplane back on the ground in a abort to landing mode. But the Sky Lancer represented the end of an era, not only for Navy jets in the sense of the single-seat, single-engine configuration, but for Douglas aircraft. It was the final Navy jet airplane built as a fighter, and really a perfect fitting ending to both the Douglas aircraft story, the model story, and this presentation of factory models for the U.S. Navy. So there you have it, a look at the historic and significant airplanes from Douglas and MacDonald in the 1950s and the jet age. My special thanks to James Planes for the use of these beautiful models. You can see the entire collection on jamesplanes.com. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Until next time, take care.